Thank you, MC Uriel, the Permanent Secretary of Finance and Treasury, and our other senior government officials. I recognize the presence of the Secretary of Foreign Affairs. Your Excellencies, representatives of the diplomatic corps, my central bank directors, the heads of financial institutions, the heads of statutory authorities, representatives of the non-governmental organizations, representatives of the private sector, the CEO and the board of the Solomon Islands Chamber of Commerce and Industry, representatives of the media, distinguished guests, good listeners on SIBC, ladies and gentlemen, it is indeed an honor for me to warmly welcome you to today's event. Thank you very much for taking the time to come out and listen to what is one of the significant events in the bank's calendar. My remarks this morning will focus on an assessment of the Solomon Islands economic performance and provide you perhaps with some food for thought as to how our country should move forward. And please note, this assessment does not provide or prescribe specific policies that we should take. Rather, it points out direction as to where we should focus our efforts and resources to ensure optimal results in terms of achieving or improved economic well-being. That said, I want to use this opportunity not simply to present statistics, but to peek beyond the numbers to the families behind every figure, the farmers behind every forecast, and the future behind every policy. Let these figures serve as a mirror to help us reflect on our strengths and weaknesses, and as a compass to help us chart our path forward with firm commitment. Before delving further, let me pause and reflect briefly on one of the proudest moments as a nation in recent years, and that is the 2023 Pacific Games. I'm sure all of us remember that. For 2 golden weeks, our nation came alive. We cheered, we celebrated, we stood as one. Every athlete had a goal. Every coach had a plan, and every volunteer had a role. And we as a nation, from all the corners of the 9 provinces and from all walks of life, united to deliver one of the most, if not the most successful Pacific Games ever. Now, what fueled this event to become a successful one? You may have your own views on this, but for me, the 2023 Pacific Games was a success due to 4 key critical areas and interrelated factors. Number 1, there is a very clear goal. It was clear right from the beginning that the ultimate goal was to build a state-of-the-art facility that will accommodate all athletes to compete. Number 2, we had a shared ownership. Having known what the goal is, and given that it is a national pride, everybody wants to own it. Everyone feels the sense of belonging. And the third, determination. Knowing that we own the facility, we own the games, we dedicate all our efforts with determination to ensure the Pacific Games is successful. And finally, there was a collective urgency to deliver excellence. Knowing that we are running out of time, there is a call for urgency to collectively ensure the facilities are completed on time. Ladies and gentlemen, we did not just achieve it, but we also delivered and fulfilled our goal of hosting the Pacific Games despite the challenges. Today, we gather at a time of profound geopolitical and geoeconomic fragmentation and uncertainty. Trade tensions are intensifying, seemingly rock-solid geopolitical ties are fracturing, and the post-war era of trade-driven globalization seems to be visibly losing steam. Meanwhile, even as the world scrambles to respond to all these challenges, climate-related shocks continue to intensify in both severity and frequency. So yes, just as we came together, cooperated and strategized to deliver on our ambition to host the 2023 Pacific Games, so too are we called upon to unite in response to the challenge we face. I will return to that later. For now, let me briefly discuss some of the economic performance of our country last year. In 2024, the global economy demonstrated resilience even in the midst of continued uncertainty. The International Monetary Fund estimates global growth to have grown by 3.3% last year. This slowdown was largely driven by anemic growth in emerging market and developing economies, not least due to the conflicts in the Middle East and Ukraine and the enduring malaise in China's property market. Closer to home, Australia and New Zealand too experienced a moderation in growth as the central banks continued to combat inflation. More generally, global inflation continued to ease through 2024, supported by falling energy prices and stable food prices, and a slight cooling in the labor markets. On the domestic front, economic growth slowed down to 2.8% in 2024, down from the Pacific Games boosted 4% expansion in 2023. Growth in 2024 is largely driven mainly by the fishing, forestry, mining, construction, manufacturing, while copper and palm oil weakened further. For the labor market conditions, it remains stable, with proxy employment indicators such as the Solomon Islands National Provident Fund member contribution and the PAYE tax revenue, which shows increasing trends, rising by 4% and 8% respectively. In terms of inflation, the headline inflation rose to 4.6% at the end of 2024, compared to 3.5% the prior year. And this was driven primarily by domestic inflation, which surged by 6.1%. Core inflation fell to 1.9%. On the external sector, the overall balance of payments increased by 60% to $350 million last year. As a result, our gross foreign reserves grew by 1% to $5.8 billion. This is in Solomon dollars. And this is equivalent to around more than 11 months of import cover. In case you are interested to know how much do we earn from remittances through the seasonal workers, our total remittances from the labor mobility scheme, the seasonal workers and the RSE, rose by 68% to $475 million. And that is for last year alone. Thanks to Australia and New Zealand for offering the opportunity. Remittances now has become the third largest foreign exchange earner for the country. Developments in the monetary sector also points to sustained growth, with broad money rising by 4%, and the private sector credit also grew by 5%. With respect to the government's finances, the fiscal deficit, based on our estimates, narrowed by 2% of GDP compared to 7% in 2023. The government debt increased to 22% of GDP, and this reflects additional external borrowings for infrastructure development. Looking ahead, the central bank projects that Solomon Islands will grow by 2.7% in 2025. And this is on the assumption that the forestry sector will decline. Nevertheless, growth is expected to be driven by the agriculture, fishing, manufacturing, construction, mining, and retail, trade, and tourism sectors. Over the medium, the economy is expected to return to the pre-pandemic levels and stabilize at 2.5% on average. And this assumes that there are no new sources of growth. Sustaining medium to long-term growth requires targeted policy adjustments, including diversifying our economy, rebuilding fiscal buffers, and strategically reallocating resources where they are best utilized to improve our socio-economic well-being. In spite of the positive growth outlook, risks remain tilted to the downside, and this include a slowdown in the forestry sector, the negative impact of climate change and pests on agricultural cash crops, coupled with the limited fiscal space and a narrow economic base, would limit the economy's future growth potential and leave it susceptible to a range of shocks. Furthermore, the country continued to face challenges such as rising costs of doing business, insecure access to land, and inefficient inter-island transportation systems. The escalation of the U.S. trade tariff tension and the ongoing political tensions and a potential global economic slowdown could weigh on the growth prospects. In case you are interested, the current Trump's tariffs policy imposes on Solomon Islands a 10% tariff. However, the direct impact of the tariff on Solomon Islands is minimal, as the share of our exports to the U.S. market comprise roughly about 0.04% of our total exports. And this is between from 2020 to 2023 numbers. However, the indirect impact will be the ones that we will feel. On the upside risk, the economy would stand to benefit from the ongoing donor support for infrastructure development and the expansion of the Pacific Australia Labour Mobility, or the PALM scheme. Digital technology also presents new opportunities to leapfrog our traditional development barriers and promote e-commerce and digital financing. Before we return to our theme, let me take us to see where we are currently standing. 5 years after the pandemic, we made some progress, but we still have a long way to go. Between 2014 and 2019, our economy grew at an average of 2.7%. In 2020, it fell by 3.4%. A modest recovery followed in 21 with 2.6% growth. Now, growth hovers around 2.5% on average, 2.9% rather, on average, better than our worst moments, but still far from our full potential. However, much of that growth came from a single event, which is the Pacific Games. Now you strip that away, and it becomes clear we are not growing fast enough and not broadly enough. Instead, we are actually growing at a pace with a one step forward and two steps backwards. And if you care to analyze our current state of play, we are actually reversing in development. Let me now return to today's theme, building the future we want through determination with a clear goal and a shared ownership that calls for collective urgent action to deliver excellence. To realize the future we envision for our country, we need more than predictions. We need a plan. Let's reflect on two possible growth paths ahead of us: the baseline scenario and an ambitious scenario, or more precisely, baseline scenario and an alternative scenario. Let me be clear, the alternative scenario or the ambitious scenario is not a wishful thinking. It is bold, it is achievable. We have achieved even higher growth rates before. Now it calls for a clear goal and ownership, dedication, coordination, and strong commitment to urgently deliver just as what the Pacific Games demanded of us. Let's briefly examine each scenario. Scenario number one, baseline scenario, do nothing. Under this scenario, the economy remains on its current path with growth hovering at around 2.5% annually through to 2030. Agriculture sees production level growing at the same current pace, with some gains in palm oil output, but with continued underutilization of resources in the cocoa and copra sectors. Manufacturing and trade expand slightly, but not fast enough to lift families out of poverty or meet the rising demand of our growing youth population. This path does not spell failure for our economy, but it lies far below our potential, and it is not transformative in the manner our current economic and historical chances require. This growth model has also historically been centered around a minute number of core commodities, and it has thus far from inclusive, often locking people in the rural areas out of the positive spillover effect on our economy. We must also address and indeed capitalize on our high population growth in our economic thinking and planning, and I am afraid we will not be able to do so under this business as usual scenario. Now let's look at scenario number two. This scenario we must all aim for. Under this scenario, we target the economy a sustained growth of at least 5% each year. This would triple agricultural output, with cocoa production increasing from 5,000 tons to 15,000 tons, copra output increased from 10,000 to 30,000 tons, coconut oil production expand from the current 5,000 tons to around 15,000 tons, palm oil output tripling to 72,000 each year. Now picture a shift towards value-added processing and the processing of raw exports to finished products. Let's turn copra into coconut oil, cocoa into chocolate, and let's lift manufacturing beyond the $1 billion mark. When Solomon Islands becomes a renowned processing hub where the raw products with which nature bountifully bestows us are transformed by our hands and our machines into beautifully crafted manufacturing goods, then trade opportunity will also expand, introducing our unique products to new markets across the Pacific and beyond. However, this won't happen by chance. It will take deliberate, sustained, and united actions. Here are a few possible policy directives or directions that could and should be taken in the next couple of years to build the future economy we want. Number one, investing in agriculture for an inclusive and broad-based economy that is from goals to results. We often hear time and again that agriculture is the backbone of our economy. Yet, the outcomes we observe do not always reflect this reality. Agriculture remains the most inclusive growth sector because our rural participants, they participate and benefit from its spillover. However, we grow the agriculture sector to reach its full potential. We must move from goals or aspirations to deliverables that can be measured. This means translating policy objectives into concrete, measurable targets by commodity and province, aligned with the local comparative advantages. For instance, in the next 3 to 4 years, we can aim to replace 10,000 hectares of aging coconut trees and expand palm oil cultivation by an additional 2,000 hectares beyond the current 6,700 hectares. We can strengthen cocoa production by planting 1,000 additional hectares in Makira, Guadalcanal, and Malaita. We can double or even triple copra production in Central, Guadalcanal, and Western Province by 2027. We must also broaden our agriculture base by scaling up new cash crops, the likes of kava, cassava, taro, and others. These targets must be measurable, time-bound, and monitored transparently. Second, investing in fiscal and human capital. Equally important is how we invest. Every dollar spent, be it private or public, must be spent where it yields the maximum impact. Investments should prioritize areas that unlock productivity growth, nurture innovation, enhance livelihoods, and build long-term resilience. These include building rural-urban infrastructure to connect farmers to markets, expanding access to affordable finance, and introducing incentives to small businesses and local farmers, adequately resourcing the Ministry of Agriculture and associate agencies such as SEMA, to partner effectively with farmers, the private sector, development partners, and programs such as Farmer Plus. Investing in technology and digital infrastructure to boost efficiency and productivity, as well as improve our tax collection. This is where we can make a real difference in people's everyday lives. Having said that, I wish to highlight that one of our milestones last year was the implementation of the payment system called the Solomon's Automated Transfer Systems, or SOLATS. The milestone lays the foundation towards an inclusive payment infrastructure, as well as embracing digitalization in our economy. Going forward, I would like to see the interoperability of the payment systems with other digital financial services, such as MCLN, UmiCash, and others, to ensure financial services are extended to the last mile, enabling the ordinary people to make payments fast, secure, safe, efficient, and all that. Now imagine teachers and nurses getting paid or accessing their salaries on time through mobile phones, such as MCLN, rather than traveling long distances to Honiara or to the urban centers just to withdraw cash. Farmers accessing information on farming techniques, markets, prices, and payments through their phones, and a faster and fairer tax systems that work for everyone. When we expand our access to digital financial services, we don't just make things easier, we bring more people into the formal economy, thereby expanding and deepening financial inclusion for all. Just as important as that we invest in our youths, we must equip them with an education that nurtures them, transforming them into both thriving and respectful citizens and self-aware economic players. We must also together build a healthcare system that strengthens them and protects them, but we cannot succeed if we do not also create ample and meaningful employment opportunities. This is not just about finding a productive way for our youths to spend their time. It is about building a more inclusive economy, one to which we all contribute and whose rising tides can in turn lift all our goals. Let's ensure our investment in both infrastructure and people is inclusive, climate resilient, and geared towards lasting transformation. Now, to unlock growth, we must accelerate reforms that matter, streamline land access and administrative processes, modernize outdated laws that no longer serve today's economy. We need to triple our efforts with shared leadership, shared responsibility, and shared success. Our growth aspirations must be inclusive. It's not just about raising numbers. It's about uplifting the people behind those numbers. The real drivers of our economy are our farmers, our young people, our women entrepreneurs, and our small business owners. We can achieve this by upgrading agricultural support services, ensuring our farmers have access to and adopt innovative farming techniques to increase their production and trade. We also need to expand access to affordable rural credit to help farmers and small businesses invest and expand. No one should be left out of this story of growth. Every person in every province must have the chance to grow, to succeed, and to contribute. Just as the Games Organizing Committee successfully use timelines and scorecards. We need to strengthen how we monitor and track our economic performance to enhance monitoring, encourage feedback and accountability. We must build effective systems that track each target, where each agricultural output or infrastructure development using timely, accurate data to inform decisions at all levels. Collective efforts are required from both data providers and data users to ensure the consistent flow of economic data, to track our investments and monitor our progress as we chart our development aspirations forward. I must acknowledge the Ministry of National Planning and Development Coordination for the role they play in assessing our national development strategy and monitoring the country's progress towards achieving the National Development Strategy 2015 to 2035. If practical, these policy and quantifiable targets should be embedded in our NDS document. We take the agriculture sector as just an illustrative example, but the same focused, results-based approach can be applied to tourism, fisheries, manufacturing, and services. Doing so will accelerate growth and open broader opportunities to shape the future we want. Just before I close off, fragmentation slows us down. If we are serious about delivering meaningful economic change, we must act with a unified purpose across all levels of society. We must rally around a national unified economic agenda. Just as we stepped up to the task by building a world-class facility and successfully hosted the Games, the Pacific Games reaffirmed to us that we are a capable nation. Yes, we are a capable nation and we can do it. Now imagine for a moment what we could have and would achieve if we channeled the same Pacific Games spirit to all those resources and all that drive, teamwork and urgency into shaping our economic future. Indeed, the Pacific Games taught us what is possible when we unite behind a clear and ambitious goal. Let us apply that same spirit, that same determination, that same urgency, the same commitment, and the same collaboration to build our economy. If we could unite to host the Games, why not unite to build and transform our economy? If we could deliver excellence in 2 weeks, imagine what we can achieve in the next decade. Ladies and gentlemen, let's not settle for 2.5% growth when 5% and beyond is within our reach. Let us commit, let us act decisively, and together let's build a country and the future we all desire. Thank you very much.